Hello, welcome to another edition of Arizona Wildcats Insiders Podcast. I'm your host, Troy Hutchison, and we're going to be talking about Noah Fafita, Brent Brennan, and the Arizona offense and how they can go about fixing it in 2025 to compare to what we saw in 2024, where Arizona was hectic, not only offensively, hectic all around, and had a very underwhelming season. But before we do that, I wanted to take a look back. I like to take a look back throughout these videos and talk a little bit about Arizona's history. And today I want to talk about the Mike Stoops era. A lot of Arizona fans will remember the Mike Stoops era as a failure. If you look at just the record at 41-50, 3 bowl games in 8 years, 9 years, and just an all-around disappointment in terms of what could have been. But I want to share some perspective of the Mike Stoops era. If you remember correctly, he took over after John Mackovic. John Mackovic easily is one of the worst coaches in Arizona football history. Took a program that was rock solid underneath Dick Tomey. Before that, Larry Smith, and even before that, not long before that, Jim Young. So Arizona's been rock solid basically from the mid 80s all the way to late 90s, and all of a sudden, John Mackovic comes in and destroys the program in about 2.5 years. Gets fired midway through the season after a loss to TCU. Things don't look very good for the Wildcats, and in comes Mike Stoops. Now, the first 2 years weren't pretty for Mike. They went 3-8 in both seasons, but got a key win over ASU in his first year, ending the drought in the Territorial Cup, beating the Sun Devils 31-24, and getting Coach Cutter fired after that season. And then the following year, beating UCLA at home. UCLA was number 7 in the country. Arizona laid a smacking on them, beating them 52-14, kind of setting the tone and setting stones for years to come. But you have to remember, in just 3 short years, Mike was able to get the team to 6-6, barely missing a bowl game. Key wins over Cal, Oregon, and Washington State near the end of the season in November, and they became the November Cats, upsetting people left and right during the Mike Stoops era in the month of November. You fast forward it to 2008, Mike Stoops ends the 10-year bowl drought, getting to the Las Vegas Bowl, finishing 8-5, beating number 16 BYU, and things looked pretty good in Tucson. You had Willie Tuitama, Mike Thomas just graduated. Rob Gronkowski was big in that game. You had Nick Grigsby and a very up-and-coming young defense. So things were looking good for Arizona, and it followed in 2009 and 2010, where Arizona nearly got to a Rose Bowl but barely lost to Oregon in a triple overtime thriller in Tucson. Mike had the program running. He understood the landscape of recruiting in Tucson. He recruited the heck out of the state of Texas, recruited the heck out of the state of California and in-state, and dominated the Polynesian community. You do that with facilities that were nowhere near what they should be at that time. They're horrible facilities. Mike always said that he was embarrassed to take recruits there at times, but yet they were still able to get top-tier talent and develop that talent into NFL talent. Yes, it all ended abruptly. Mark Stoops left for Florida State. Sonny Dykes left for Louisiana Tech. So you lose your top 2 coordinators, one on offense, one on defense, and it's hard to replace that. And it kind of spiraled out of control for Mike Stoops at that point. There's off-field issues in terms of, him going through his divorce and all that kind of stuff. And it just seemed to all culminate to one big moment for him where Greg Burns relieved him of his duties in 2011 after a 1-5 start, but there are injuries, there are off-field things going on, there are on-field things going on, just a whole entire spiral effect where it kind of became a little too much for Stoops. You have to wonder, though, what he could have done with the new facilities that he so hardly worked to get in Tucson, where Rich Rodriguez was able to pay the benefits of that in terms of the new football facilities, the new strength and conditioning room, being in Arizona Football Stadium instead of in the basketball stadium for the football offices. Mike was the guy that started that whole entire movement and never got to pay the benefits of that. And you saw what Rich Rod did with the recruiting there. They weren't very good at recruiting, especially the defensive side of the ball. Rich Rod always talked about OKGs, his kind of guys, and developing players. But truth be told, the recruitment just wasn't very good underneath the Rich Rod regime compared to the Mike Stoops era. So you got to wonder what Mike could have been able to do with those facilities and how he was able to develop players. I think Arizona fans need to take a look back and look at the Mike Stoops era with fondness and realize that he was creating the building blocks to a successful program, from the depths of hell of the Makovic era to becoming a very stable and competitive team midway there. And, you know, it's not an easy task. There are a lot of obstacles in front of him. There are a lot of roadblocks. You have the Pac-10 with one of the strong conferences, and yet they were able to overcome that and become a very competitive football team and put guys in the NFL. So I think looking back, even though it was 41-50 as an all-time record for Mike Stoops at Arizona, I would say it's a successful tenure, and one Arizona fans need to be more easy on and realize the roadblocks in front of them. Mike followed the blueprint of Dick Tomey in terms of recruiting the Polynesian community, state of Texas, and being a hard-nosed football coach. And that's kind of been the blueprint here in Tucson. And you've seen Jed Fish follow that blueprint, and now Brett Brennan's following that as well. So I credit Mike Stoops and what he was able to do during a difficult time of Arizona football and getting Arizona back on the map. So looking at Noah Fifita and Brent Brennan for 2025, there's a lot of offensive issues that they got to fix. I think number one primarily is keeping Noah Fifita off the ground. He was sacked 28 times last year compared to, I believe, 19 times his first season. So that's a significant jump. The offensive line was jumbled and filled with injuries, but they got to work on getting the ball out of his hands quicker, and that's going to be Seth Daigie's job in this new offensive scheme, which I think meets Noah Fifita's needs better than what you just saw a season ago. Number two is holding on to the football. Too many turnovers. Noah Fifita had 12 interceptions, countless fumbles. You got to hold on to the ball, protect the ball better. Maybe use your feet a little bit more. And Noah Fifita talked about that during Pac-12 Media Day, that he's working on using his legs. He has the ability to do so, but has been more of a pocket passer during his time in Tucson. And then let's talk about running the football. Last year, Arizona's offense was struggling. Noah Fifita was struggling. They was holding on to the ball too long. What is the perfect remedy for that? It's running the ball. It's taking time off the clock, running the football, and giving your quarterback time to pass in the pocket. And Noah Fifita just didn't have that. Arizona really didn't go to the run very much. And when they did, they found themselves trailing games so far back that they couldn't rely upon it. I think you need to run the ball earlier and trust your running backs to get these 4, 5, 6 yard gains. They have talented backs, and Kedrick Rossano was very talented last year, but the refusal to run the football was something that Arizona couldn't overlook. That's why they brought in a new offense coordinator. I know Seth Daigie is an air raid guy, but if you look at it at Marshall, they're 20th in rushing, and he talked about that. And that's one of the things that impressed Brett Brennan about him, is the understanding to need to run the football to win games. Seth Daigie is that type of dude that will do whatever he needs to do to win a football game. And to me, yes, he's an air raid guy, but he follows more of that Rich Rod style play in terms of up-tempo, a little bit more pass-happy than Rich Rod, obviously, but he will be willing to run the football and excel at a high level in terms of up-tempo. So I think it's more towards the Rich Rod side of up-tempo offense than a Mike Leach side where you're throwing it out on screen passes and getting upfield. I think it's a thing to look at this season. And then finally, again, the offensive line, Arizona just needs to stay healthy there. Last year, they were banged up. You saw Rhino go down, and that was a massive blow. Raymond Polito left the football team right before the start of the season. So you can't have those situations where you have nobody there. You have to have depth. You have to have guys on the line you can trust. Arizona's brought in a lot of offensive linemen via transfer and via the incoming freshman class, the recruiting class. Let's see if they can develop not only during training camp, but throughout the season and build a steady line. Lastly, I want to talk about Brent Brennan. You got to believe in running the football. You got to believe in Noah Fifita, which I think he showed last year, but maybe be a little more aggressive in certain situations. There were times throughout the year where Arizona was trailing by maybe a touchdown, maybe 14 points, and it was a 4th and 3, a 4th and 4 midfield, and you're punting the football. With how things were going for Arizona at that time. I would like to have seen a little bit more aggression out of him in those situations, and it's easier said from up in the press box than down there on the football field. But when things are piling against you, you got to take some risk. And I think that's one thing to see this season when Seth Dagey, a more offensive, how do I say this? A more innovative offensive mind than the previous offense coordinator. I think there's going to have to be that give and take of being a little bit more aggressive. So we will be back with another episode, and we'll catch you next time.